Hello everybody and welcome back to the Auto Guide YouTube channel. I am your host Chase Bierenkoven, and this, if you hadn't guessed from the rather prominent badging, is the 2024 Ford Bronco. More specifically, this is the Everglades edition, which gets you some of the more off-road focused accessories that are available with the Bronco, like the snorkel, wheels and tires, some extra badging, and a little bit more that we'll get into later. Now, it's been a while since the Bronco has come out, hasn't it? There was that whole pandemic thing, there was a lot of hype around these, people were flipping them for crazy amounts of money, and then the hype kind of died down and things got normal, and this turned back into just a car. And because it's just a car, or an SUV if you want to be really pedantic, that means that you spend 99% of your time out here. Asphalt, right? Ground, solid ground, not off-road. And so, rather than bringing you an extremely off-road focused look at the Bronco, which I think has kind of been done before, I want to talk today about what the Ford Bronco is like as just a car, a toaster, a thing to get you from point A to point B and back again, and how good this dedicated off-roader is at being just a car. I do just want to throw in some specifics on what the Everglades gets you, because you do get some good stuff. For instance, there is this giant worn winch. There's also the snorkel I mentioned earlier, a set of trim-specific 17-inch wheels with big fat mud tires on them, and you also get your fair share of Everglades branding included. Let's talk design real quick. I think that the Bronco looks fantastic. There is just enough retro here, right? With the grille and the headlights, I think that is a very nice retro touch. There's also the overall silhouette of the car, the box shape, the three-box design is extremely retro inspired, but the rest of this is thoroughly modern, and I think it looks really great. We've got nice big tires. I love these more solid, blocky wheels. I think these look way cooler than the beadlock capable ones, but you obviously lose the beadlock capability. Moving on down the side, there's also the detachable roof panels, right? Here and here. So what we can do is we can come in here and we can undo a couple of latches up in here, right? And then pop the roof off. It's a little tough with these rails, but the rails kind of add to the look, I think, and you can, of course, stick stuff on top, like a roof tent, some kayaks, some whatever. Around the back, right? Big tire, yeah. Looks pretty nice, doesn't it? I'll let you drink it in. In truth, what I was doing was stalling for the train, but overall, I think that the Bronco looks really great. I think that the little facelifting they have done so far has really added a lot to the car. And really my biggest complaint is that this isn't a two-door, because the two-door just looks so much cooler. Okay, next let's hop in front, go through some of the bits and pieces. Whew. Get this thing to stop hollering at us. Close the door. Wait for it to stop hollering. We're actually doing a little bit better on fuel economy. We're getting about 19, which is pretty solid. As you can see, there is a digital gauge cluster in the middle. It's pretty small. We have a physical speedometer on the left-hand side and then the screen on the right. We can move through some various parameters here, some trip computers, fuel economy, etc., etc. This one is a little devoid of some of the tech options. You can see there's some blank spots here for the adaptive cruise control as well as the heated steering wheel, but we do still have some nice heated seats, and this whole cluster is really a highlight of the Bronco experience, if you ask me. That's because these are big, legible, physical, easy to use controls, and something that is missing from the broader automotive landscape for reasons unknown. Actually, no, I know the reasons. It's money. Now, let's move on to the big screen. It's a pretty decent sized screen, right? It's about a foot. We have Android Auto, as you can tell. There's also Ford's own native system, which works, copyrighted music, which works pretty darn well. There's also CarPlay, and they are wireless. This does not have the wireless charger, but you get a little cubby to keep your Ray-Bans in. There are some other features in here, but a lot of these are reserved for more luxurious trims of the Bronco. speaking of, there's some nice badging over here, right? That's pretty nice. Nice big glove box. This has got the winch controller in it, so it looks kind of small. This also is one of my favorite things about the Bronco. Let's come over here real quick. Stop getting yelled at by the car. This netted door pocket is so great because I can fit a big giant water bottle in it, or any size water bottle. If I want to fit a smaller water bottle, I can, because the net changes shape. Imagine that. Now let's get down here, because this is very important. These, we'll have to start the car again. These are your GOAT modes. That's the goes over all terrain. This is your four-wheel drive selector. You can select any number of these. For example, we can put it in four-wheel drive automatic, or we can just leave it in two-wheel drive because we are commuting. And as you turn the dial, you can see that, well, we go through all of our different modes. I'm gonna put it back in eco because we need all the help that we can get. But there's also sport and slippery and mud and ruts and sand and rock crawl, and they all do various things on what Ford calls the hero panel. This is your front differential locker, your rear differential locker, your trail turn assist, your traction control, and of course the hazards. Now this little spot here is empty, and it's very important. That is for disconnecting or reconnecting the sway bars. This doesn't have it, and it's a big negative, because having those disconnectable sway bars not only improves your wheel articulation off-road, but you are also able to benefit from a much improved ride. And with that, I think it's a good time to, oh, just one more thing. Clicky switches. And with that, I think it's a very good time to get him back and talk about what it's like back there. So what's it like in the backseat of the Bronco? Well, in a word, pretty spacious. I'm 5'8". I've got a lot of knee room, a lot of foot room. I can really like lay back and kind of recline if I want to. I have excellent headroom. There's a lot of space in here, and by and large, that's something that I prefer over the Jeep Wrangler. There's a lot more space between me and the car. And what I mean by that is there's generally more room on my left side between the end of my body and the door than there is in the Wrangler. You pay for that in maneuverability. Of course, the Bronco's just a hair wider. There are other things to like back here as well. Ford has these very clever, like mole webbed harnessy strap things that you can put some accessories on. So for example, if you need some recovery gear, easy to access in the cab, this is a good place for it. Or maybe you want to put down some extra cup holders. This again has the clever netted door pockets that are very useful for water bottles. There's also some other storage here, some nets. There are window switches on the center stack, of course, because the doors can be removed, which is a very cool feature. There's also two USB ports and a big fat 110 volt outlet. There's a lot of room back here. However, I do have a gripe, and it's really more as a driver than anything. These headrests really should be down while you're driving, otherwise you lose quite a lot of visibility in what otherwise is a truck with really great visibility. And that's really about it. So let's move in back and talk a little bit more about cargo space, because that's really the reason you would buy a four-door Bronco. Let's talk cargo. First, I want to tell you about how this stacks up against the Wrangler. The two are pretty much dead nuts even, 38 cubic feet of cargo space. So there's no real concerns there, but the Ford does have some nice accessories back here that are worth mentioning, or rather places to put them. There's another set of accessory rails here on the tailgate, and there's a little storage cubby back over here over my right shoulder. You can also order some cargo nets and covers and things like that, but the coolest feature back here is this little thing, which I think is a must for the Bronco. Ford calls it, I can't remember what Ford calls it, oh, the tailgating table, which this is. It's a nice little pull-out table accessory that you can add to any Bronco, and it gives you a little bit more extra storage space, a little bit more extra work surface, and it's actually quite nice. So first, I think we should talk about how the Ford Bronco drives off-road. After all, that's kind of why you want to buy one of these, isn't it? It's because it's a big off-roader. And this is a really great off-roader. As long as you have the locking differentials, there's functionally no way to get one of these stuck. Now, we recently spent a lot of time at Ford's Bronco Off-Rodeo in the Las Vegas desert, and that proved to me that these are functionally impossible to get stuck. If you do get stuck and your tires are sliding around, all you have to do is reach up here and hit that rear locker, and then you're up and over whatever it is. Now, if you are more stuck than that, all you have to do is then enable a front locker, and you could probably drive up the side of a building. Speaking of buildings, you'll probably have to take this to one because, let's be honest, you'll probably have to commute. Your shitty boss wants you back in the office, and you now have to bring your weekend toy, your Ford Bronco, out into the city, into the urban wilds. And that's kind of where the problems start for the Bronco, because while this is a really great off-roader, it is a terrible car to drive in the city. It's very wide, it's extremely tall. As a result, it's rather hard to park. Only upper trim levels have the 360 camera, so you're stuck with just a backup camera in a very wide, very tall car. Luckily, visibility is quite good. If you're a little bit on the short side, say like me, around 5'8", you can get the seat up nice and high, still have lots of headroom, and be able to see, which is fantastic because you can sort of see down onto the road. The tie-down points at either end of the hood provide a nice view of where the inside of the wheel is, which means you always know where your wheels are, and that makes getting around just a little bit easier. Let's talk ride too, because the ride is also really pretty trucky, which is really just a byword for not great, right? It's not. It's really stiff, especially for whatever reason I feel in the rear. The back end of this car feels super, super, super stiff. It moves around and shimmies. Frankly, this feels like something that the Donner Party would have used to cross the San Juans, only maybe a Ford Bronco would have gotten them all the way. It's just not great. The steering, again, kind of feels like something the Donner Party would have used. Extremely vague. I almost feel like I have to pull back and say whoa when I want the car to stop, because the brakes are, pardon my pun, also woeful. They're not great. No surprise, right? So why do I like this thing so much? Well, because of that. I like this. It's good bad. I like this truck because of its character. The fact that it's constantly bouncing around and shaking you all over the place, and the steering is terrible, and the brakes are really pretty bad. It makes this car feel old, and it has a sort of charm as a result. There's not a lot of modern edges in here. Yeah, there's cruise control and automatic climate control and heated seats and CarPlay and Android Auto, but there's also some rough edges to this car that I think really, really give it some texture and some personality that a lot of the SUV segment lacks. This isn't just a toaster, and for that reason, that almost makes it a really good toaster to me, if that makes sense. I like to have an experience when I get in the car, even if I'm just going to the grocery store, and the Bronco delivers every single time. There is an experience to be had every time you get in this car. And I haven't even gotten to the fact that you can take the roof and the doors off, which is even more of an experience. I love driving this thing around on a nice day with the roof off and the doors off and my legs hanging out into traffic, ready to be snapped off by passing bikes or whatever. I love that. These are quite pricey. This one specifically, this Everglades edition, with the 4-cylinder motor and the 10-speed automatic transmission, will cost you at MSRP $55,720. But thanks to $995 of Azure gray metallic tri-coat paint and $160 worth of floor mats, this truck, as spec'd after destination, will run you $58,770. So, darn near $60,000 for a dedicated off-roader that you should, in theory, be able to drive every day. So, with that out of the way, let's talk powertrain. Well, here it is, the Bronco's 2.3 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. Here it is mated to a 10-speed automatic transmission with, of course, 4-wheel drive. That is standard in the Bronco lineup, but as I mentioned, the Wildtrak gets you that intelligent 4-wheel drive mode. Now, there is also on offer a 7-speed manual transmission. I say 7 with some air quotes because the 7th speed is really just a low-ratio crawler gear. It's great for rock crawling or, alternatively, creeping around in very low-speed traffic. That, if you ask me, is the one to get because big manual off-roader. It's really cool, and it's, in my opinion, worth the hit in power. This is still a pretty healthy powertrain. You get 300 horsepower and 325 pounds-feet of torque. Now, there is a larger V6 engine. That is a 2.7-liter turbocharged unit, and that'll make 330 horsepower and 415 pounds-feet of torque. But at the cost of fuel economy, that's about 17 miles per gallon overall. This is about 20. However, in the real world, you're going to see V6 fuel economy numbers with the 4-cylinder. So Lord knows what the V6 is doing. I'm getting about 18.7-ish miles per gallon, and that is 80% highway driving. We did a little off-roading this weekend, but a lot of my time was spent on the highway. I took this up to the Robert Plant concert, great show by the way, and then drove it back down and spent the majority of my time sitting on the highways of local Denver, Colorado. And so with that in mind, the fuel economy certainly suffers, which is something we'll want to keep in mind when we are evaluating the Bronco through the lens of it being just a car. Okay, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. The Jeep Wrangler also exists. It's also just a hair cheaper than the Bronco in some trim levels at some points. But broadly speaking, if you can spend $58,000, $57,000 on a Bronco, you can also spend that amount of money on a Jeep. Now, I said it was a little bit cheaper to start, and it is. The Wrangler Sport 2-door with the 6-speed manual and the V6 is $31,995. Comparatively, a 2-door base Bronco is $39,630. So if you're just looking to get in on the ground floor, in the basement, really, and spend as little money as possible on a new off-roader, Wrangler. Well, with that said, I think it's time to wrap this sucker up. What do you do with the Ford Bronco? Well, I'll tell you one thing. I like it a lot better than the Jeep Wrangler. It wins for me on character. I talked a lot about this in the driving impressions, but I really, really enjoy the character of this car. The truckiness, the frankly crap ride, it's all part of a broader experience that the Bronco provides that I much prefer to the experience the Wrangler provides. It might kind of seem like splitting hairs. After all, they're big off-roaders that can conquer pretty much any terrain and the commute, and they have removable doors and roofs. Ford pretty much built this to spec to take on the Wrangler. But I just think that Ford has beaten Jeep at its own game. I find it much more appealing, but you, because they are so close, may not share the same opinion as me. But what I do need you to do is share this video, like it, and subscribe it, because those 3 things really do help us out. We get to keep getting fantastic cars like this, I get to keep standing here and talking to you, and it all works out for everybody in the end. So with that in mind, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.